Hello, everyone. So today we are going to do a little bit of review about ecosystems. So we're going to take a little bit of a break from discussing watersheds, and yes, next class we will continue talking about watersheds. And actually, next class we're going to talk about a new aspect of watersheds. So today's warm up is what is an ecosystem? This was your lesson 2 exit slip. But so for today, for the warm up, I want you to write your best definition of an ecosystem. Please remember to use your own words and your own thoughts and avoid using Google. I really want to know what you think. So go ahead and pause this video for however long it takes you to write the warm up and then come back. All right, awesome. So today's agenda is we just did the warm up, which was not compare and contrast. It was writing a definition of ecosystems. I always forget to change that. And then next we're going to review the test from last Wednesday. That test was about ecosystems. And then finally, you're going to have some work time. So awesome. So let's take a quick look at your ecosystems test. So I see there's a lot of information here, but basically if you look at this graph, this is our total points distribution. So down here we have points scored, so this is your score, and then on the left it says number of respondents, so how many people got that score. So for example, 20 out of 20 we had 5 people get 20 out of 20, 10 out of 20 we had about 4 people get that. And so looking at this graph, our average was 10.5, which means most people were kind of in this range, somewhere between 7 and we'll say 14. If you look at your grades on Student Backpack, I think that's what the app is called, Student Backpack. If you look on Student Backpack, you'll notice that your score is somewhere between 55% and 100%. So your score on Student Backpack does not necessarily match the score that you got on this test. So for example, like a 10 out of 20 that's not 77%, that would be 50%, but on Student Backpack, it's going to be a 77%. And these numbers just say relatively how much of a master you are of this content, so how much of an expert you are, right? Because we're mostly in here, I think we have some room to improve. We always have room to improve. So today we're going to review the test, review some of the key concepts of the test, go over some misconceptions, so some ideas that a lot of people maybe didn't understand. Maybe I didn't teach it quite right, and that's okay. Mistakes happen. And at the end of class, you're going to have time to retake the test, and hopefully we'll see that we move from here over to here, or even all the way up here, right? So let's get started. Let's take a look at the warm-up. The question was, what is an ecosystem? I hope you wrote your answer. In class, we shared out answers, but I'm just talking to a computer right now. So I will tell you there are 3 components of an ecosystem. There are biotic factors, there are abiotic factors, and there is a specific place. So something like a physical environment or an area. So your definition has to have all 3 of these things. Biotic factors, remember, means living. Abiotic factors means not living. So an ecosystem is a place, or is a physical environment where living organisms interact with the non-living aspects, the non-living factors of that ecosystem. Right? Your definition needs to sound something like that. Living, non-living, and a specific place. So right now, I want you to go back to your warm-up, and I want you to take 1 minute to fix your answer. So this is really important because this warm-up is the same as your lesson 2 exit slip, which a lot of students did not get quite right. So if you write a perfect answer for your warm-up right now, I will give you full credit for your Lesson 2 exit slip. All right, so please take a minute to go back and edit your answer in Google Classroom. It's really important so I can give you a better score now that you know the definition of an ecosystem. All right, so I hope you just edited your answer. You need to do that. But now let's talk about biotic versus abiotic factors. So biotic means living. Bio means life, so biotic means living as an adjective. And so biotic factors are things like plants, animals, bacteria. They're very small, but they're still living. Fungi, and then something called protists. You've probably never heard of protists. I think I didn't learn about protists until I got into high school biology. But protists they're basically really, really, really small multicellular organisms. So maybe they have a few cells, but they're really, really, really tiny. And that's another kind of living organism. All right, so that's biotic. Abiotic means non-living. So remember, bio means life. When A is at the beginning of a word, it means not. So abiotic means not living. And some non-living things that we see in an ecosystem are things like water, soil, air, minerals, and light. So really quickly, right now, we're going to play a game. I'm going to show you a thing. And in your head, I want you to pause the video, and I want you to think about whether this thing is abiotic or biotic, right? So this first thing, is this abiotic or is it biotic? This is abiotic. It's a rock. Rocks are not living. All right, thing number 2. This is living. So this is a jaguar. It is a biotic factor in the ecosystem that it lives in. It's alive, it's living, so it's biotic. All right, thing number 3. All right, this is biotic. This is bacteria. And bacteria, like I said, even though they're really small, they are living. They do reproduce. They are made up of cells. They're living. And a very important part of our ecosystems. Right? Bacteria is biotic. Thing number 4. This is temperature, by the way. All right, temperature is abiotic. Temperature is not living. Yeah, temperature, you can't even see temperature. So yeah, that is not living. And thing number 5. Right, so these might look like bricks, but actually they are plant cells, and they are plant cells of algae, which is biotic. So algae is biotic. It's living. A lot of students think that algae is not living, but it is living. Definitely living. Right? So that was a quick practice on biotic versus abiotic. And now we're going to move into, we're going to talk really quickly about omnivores. So omnivores are animals that eat both plants and animals. So all of these animals right here eat both plants and animals. And omnivores can be a secondary or a tertiary consumer. So if it's a secondary consumer, then it eats primary consumers, animals, and producers, which are plants. It can also be a tertiary consumer. If it's a tertiary consumer, then it eats a secondary consumer and maybe also a primary consumer, which are both animals, and also producers, which are plants. So we humans we're higher than tertiary consumers, but we haven't talked about things higher than tertiary consumers. So basically, we're tertiary consumers. We eat secondary consumers, primary consumers, and producers. So now I'm going to show you some food webs, and these food webs have a lot of details in them. But what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and find the omnivores in these ecosystems. So where is the omnivore in this food web? So please pause the video. All right, so I hope you've looked at this video for like a minute and you've found the omnivores. There are two omnivores in this video, or in this photo. The first one is the black bear. So the black bear eats persimmons. Remember, the arrow shows where food goes. So the persimmon is like a snack for the black bear, so it goes to the black bear. So the black bear eats persimmons, which are a fruit. The black bear also eats caterpillars and beavers. So see, we've got those two arrows going to the black bear here. So black bear is an omnivore. All right. The other one that we have is the pine vole. And I see that my PowerPoint's kind of, well, maybe my face is covering the arrows a little bit, but the pine vole eats persimmons. So this arrow all the way up here, this goes all the way down to pine vole, which is down here. It eats persimmons, and it also eats caterpillars. See that arrow coming from caterpillar? These are the only two omnivores in this food web. And I don't think this is the complete food web. There are other organisms that are not on here. But from what we can see, these are the only two omnivores. Some students think that maybe the fungi are omnivores. Fungi cannot be omnivores because they are decomposers. And also, they're not animals. Omnivores are always animals. All right, so it's only the pine vole and the black bear. All right, and where are the omnivores on this picture? So again, pause the video. You're gonna have to take a minute to look at this one. There's a lot of stuff happening here. Let's pause the video, pause the video. All right, so we have three omnivores in this picture. So the first one is the okapi, which eats insects. You can see this arrow. Again, this is complicated. It eats insects, and it also eats bamboo. So that's one of the omnivores. The second omnivore is the parrot, which also eats insects and fruit bats. So those are both animals. And the parrot also eats, where's this arrow coming from? Nuts and seeds. And then the last omnivore is the chimpanzee, which eats nuts and seeds and bamboo and insects. And insects are animals, so this makes the chimpanzee an omnivore. So one thing to note is that all three of these omnivores are secondary consumers. That does not mean that all secondary consumers are omnivores. This is just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence that in this food web, all the secondary consumers are omnivores. That doesn't always happen, right? But again, omnivores eat plants and animals. All right, and while we're talking about food webs, let's take a look at this food web and answer some quick misconceptions that we might have about food webs. So the first question is, what do the arrows mean and which way should they point? So pause the video and think about it for a second. Excuse me. So the arrows point from the prey to the predator. They always point from the prey to the predator. And that's because the arrow shows the transfer of energy. So remember, humans, when we eat a snack, all of the calories in that snack goes to our mouths. It goes to us. We get all that energy. So we would want to draw the snack, and then the human, we would want to draw an arrow pointing to the human because we get all of those calories and all that energy. It's the same thing in a food web. For this frog, the butterfly is like a snack. So all of the energy from that butterfly goes to the frog. So the arrow always points to the predator, right? And let's also take a look at, let's try to read the food web a little bit. How many species does the buzzard feed on? So the buzzard's up here. How many species does it eat? All right, so to tell how many species an animal eats, we just have to look at the number of arrows pointing to it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 arrows pointing to the buzzard. That means the buzzard eats 4 different species. And, all right, let's take a look at the frog. How many species does the frog feed on? All right, so the frog feeds on 3 species. So remember, we have to look at the species. We have to count how many arrows are pointing towards it. So we've got 1, 2, 3 arrows pointing to the frog. So the frog eats 3 species. But there's one more arrow between the frog and the snake. What does that arrow indicate? What does that arrow show? It shows that the frog is food for the snake. So we don't count that one because the frog doesn't eat snakes. Actually, snakes eat the frog. So it's just 1, 2, 3 arrows pointing to the frog. 3 species are food for the frog. So the frog feeds on 3 species. That's the better way to say it. All right, so that's just a quick food webs review. Next, I want to quickly review energy pyramids. So where in the energy pyramid is there the most energy? All right, so there is the most energy at the bottom with the producers. Why is that? Remember that, well, it doesn't matter. Remember that, remember the rule of 10, which says that only 10% of the energy from one trophic level can go to the next. So maybe down here, producers have 10,000 calories. But the next trophic level, the primary consumers, they can only get like 1,000 of that. And then the secondary consumers, only 100. Tertiary consumers, 10, very little. And the reason that producers can have so much energy is because they have access to the sun. They're the only organisms that can use the sun's energy to make food. And the sun's energy is basically unlimited. The only thing that limits producers is how much space and how much water there is. So if there's enough room for the producers and there's enough water and nutrients, then they will grow and they will use the sun's energy. So because producers can use as much of the sun's energy as they want, or as they're able to, they have the most energy. So down here, the producers, this bottom part, they have the most energy. Now, where is there the least energy? So yeah, the tertiary consumers. So the tertiary consumers have the least amount of energy. Again, that's because of the rule of 10. So if we look here, they can only, in this example, they can only get 10 calories of the sun's energy. after all of the energy is lost as that goes up the trophic levels. And remember, we lose energy when we go from one trophic level to the next because of heat. All organisms produce heat. They radiate heat. Right now, you're producing heat. I'm producing heat. Nothing can eat that heat. It keeps us warm, but it's useless. It's useless. We just can't survive on heat alone. So all of that heat is wasted energy. Nobody can eat that. Nothing can eat that. So that's why at the top, they don't have access to a lot of energy. That's also why at the top there are the fewest organisms. They're the fewest organisms at the top just because there's the least amount of energy there. And for that same reason, there are the most organisms at the bottom. That's because there's the most energy there. As long as there's space, there can be producers, and there can always be more producers if there's more space. They're not really limited. They're only limited by space, water, and that's it, because there's a ton of sunlight. So anyway, so these were just two things that I wanted to tell you about or review with you about energy pyramids. And then lastly, so for the rest of class, from this class, students, they edited their tests, their ecosystems tests. And to do that, you go into Google Classroom. To do that, all right, so to do that, you go into Google Classroom and you click on Ecosystems Mastery Test, and that's in Ecosystem Test under week 4. So go ahead and click on that. You're going to get this screen. It's going to say you've already responded. You can only fill out this form once. You can only fill out Google Forms one time from now on in this class. But you can always go back and edit your responses. So if you click on Edit Your Responses, it'll take you to all of the answers that you put previously, and you can go ahead and change your answers. So these were my terrible answers. This was just a bad example, but I can go back and I can change all my answers here. All right. So remember to change your answers, just click on Edit Your Response. All right, and then after you edit your response, I get a notification and I can go back and regrade your work. All right, so go ahead and go back and redo your ecosystems test. And yes, and then when you're done, you can also go back and revise your lesson 3 exit slip redo. And then you can also, sorry, that's only if you're in classes 4, 5, and 7. And then if you're in any class watching this, you can also redo your lesson 4 exit slip to improve your score. And then lastly, there are still a few students who have not done the Mono Lake video quiz, or who did it and did not get a great score. So you can also go back, watch that video, and then redo the quiz. And this is important because we're almost done with this marking period. We have 1.5 more weeks in this marking period, and then I have to submit your grades. And I would like to submit your most updated grades, your best grades. So we're going to take some time and try to go back and improve those scores. All right. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in class.